Welcome to the kitchen. This is the rectory. This is my kitchen. These are my recipes. Today we're making one of my favorites, which is salsa. And I think it's going to be one of your favorites too.
Have some more chicken, have some more pie. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or fried. Just eat it. Don't you make me repeat it.
Hello, I'm Father Timothy Matkin. Welcome to the first ever Rector's Recipes. Today I'm making one of my favorite and I can't wait to get to it. And I'll tell you what happened here is I love going to Mexican restaurants and I love the salsa. But not every salsa is that great at every place. Even if everything else on the menu is pretty good, sometimes the salsa just isn't up to par. Now my favorite restaurant salsa comes from On the Border. And they sell their own brand in the grocery store, but it's not quite the same thing. So I went looking for a copycat recipe online. And I found one, and it was pretty good. It wasn't quite the same, but I kind of tweaked it a little bit and made it my own, and I really came to like it, and I think you'll like it too. So let's get to it. The first thing is, we're talking about basically tomato sauce when we're talking about salsa. And so the recipe called for tomatoes, and I tried tomatoes, but I wasn't satisfied with that outcome. Because what I found was that the salsa I made was very brown and basically looked like mud. And it separated easily from the salsa bits and just water. And so I thought, well, maybe fresh isn't always better. So I set aside the tomatoes and I went canned. Now you may recoil at that, but trust me, go canned. Or if you have a very favorite tomato, what I would do, and I'm going to try this later on in the springtime when I grow my own tomatoes, is take the tomatoes but add a can of tomato paste, one of the small cans of tomato paste. But the best canned tomatoes you can get are these, the Cento brand San Marzano. And these are basically whole peeled tomatoes. And you're going to take this big can, I think it only comes in the big can, and the nice thing is you don't have to go to a specialty grocery store like one of those fancy ones in North Dallas or something. You can just find these at, well, I get it at Walmart. So open up the can and pour it in. It has a lot of nice red sauce in there too. That's nice because you're going to get actually red salsa rather than brown salsa. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to take peppers. And what I really like are these big ones, big Poblano. I say experiment. Do whatever you like. Try some little ones, try some jalapeno, try some Anaheim. Whatever appeals to you, give it a try. One other thing I'm going to grab from the refrigerator, as I forgot, is I also like to add some of these jarred pickled jalapenos because they tend to add, I guess it's the vinegar, it adds sort of a tanginess to it that's very appealing. So I'm going to put a few of those in there as well. First of all, we're going to cut up the pepper. And we want to be sure and leave in the seeds because that's where the hotness comes from. But if you don't like the hotness, then feel free to discard the seeds. And you don't have to cut it up very much, basically just enough to get it into the blender. And then we want to get some of these. And what I would do is just pull out a few of them with a fork. And there'll be plenty of juice on there, so you don't have to pour in the juice. Just pull out a few jalapenos. Now you'll find as we go along that I don't worry too much about exact measurements. And in fact, unless you're baking, you really don't have to worry about exact measurements too much. I encourage you to experiment a little bit. In fact, behind me I have a few kind of show and tell items that I myself would like to try in future doings of these. I thought about perhaps using celery salt instead of plain salt, or using chipotle chili powder. Or I found there's paprika, which would be good, or smoked paprika. I also found this orange pepper, so I want to try it with that sometime. And of course you can add your own favorite hot sauce. This is the Pickled Jalapenos, and this is the Tapatio, which is my favorite. Well, let's get to the onion. I remember my grandfather, he would make his own salsa, and his secret ingredient was super concentrated Jamaican hellfire sauce. And that made it a bit hot. I would either get a small onion like this, or if you got a big onion, use about half of it. Again, you don't have to cut it up too much, just get the exterior off and put it in there. Let the machine do the work for you. Also, the recipe calls for lime juice, and so you can use prepared lime juice like this, and you would use 2 teaspoons. But what I'm going to do today is use just an actual lime, and I'm going to cut the whole thing in half and just squeeze it, and that should be just about right. Make sure you got a big strong man around in the house to get all that juice squeezed out of the lime. Oh, that's very nice. That's going to be good. All right, we'll set that aside. Now, we're going to add all our secret spicy ingredients. And the measurement that we're going to use, you only need 1 teaspoon. Everything's a teaspoon. Makes it very simple. So you get yourself some garlic, minced garlic, teaspoon. Again, don't worry about exact measurements. You don't have to scrape it off. It could be a heaping teaspoon or whatever you want. Cayenne pepper. Of course, this is where the hotness comes in, so tailor it to your own taste. Maybe some of you won't like any pepper. Maybe some of you will like more. The recipe called for 1 teaspoon, but I like it a little hotter, so I put in a second one. Should I do it? Let's go for it. All right. Cumin, that great Mexican flavor comes from cumin. So put 2 teaspoons of this. And you can look down below and find all these notes for the recipe. And then you're going to do 1 teaspoon of salt. Now, the other main ingredient is cilantro. I love cilantro. It's got that great taste. And you can use fresh cilantro. That's pretty good. But what I found was that you can use dried cilantro, and it doesn't really make that much difference. And of course, it's a whole lot easier. So if you're using fresh, then use a whole bunch of it that you get at the grocery store, and you got to pick up all the leaves and put them together and throw them in there. Or if you're going to use prepared, then you would use about 1/3 of a cup. And very handily, this lid is right about 1/3 of a cup. So I just make it easy and fill up the lid and dump it in there. All right, we're all ready to go. Now this will make about as much salsa as to fill an empty spaghetti jar and a salsa dish. And that should be right about that level of volume. So let's give it a whirl. Looks pretty good. And then we will go ahead and fill our spaghetti sauce jar. Right up to the top. And then the rest will go into our salsa bowl. Now for the taste. Well, now for the best part, which is the tasting And here I have my special assistant, Maddie, to help me with the tasting. Now what I recommend, I mean, use your own favorite chips, but my favorite is, you know, the Walmart brand, the lightly salted restaurant-style tortilla chip. 98 cents, I think, a bag. But I like it because it's white corn and it's light and crisp, where some other chips are more kind of heavy. And we also have standing by an emergency bottle of water just in case it's too hot. Well, it's time for the tasting. We ready?
No.
No? Well, let's dive into it and see what we think. I like to get a lot of salsa on my chip. So what do you think of that flavor profile?
It's good.
I love it. Like I said, one of my favorites. I think it's going to be one of your favorites too. Well, happy eating. Maybe it was too hot. We got the water. More for me.